the teams, the sellers that win in the next 5 to 10 years with the new paradigm that we're in are going to be those that smartly deploy AI to strategically engage customers with both relevancy and timeliness. And the ones that do not do that, that look for shortcuts, I'm not very bullish on those.
Welcome back to the Thoughts on Selling podcast. Today, it is my pleasure to have Dustin Beaudoin on with me. Dustin and I have some very similar philosophies about how salespeople can prepare for discussions with customers. And based on a few initial conversations, I thought it'd be really interesting to have Dustin on and talk about that perspective and to share what he's been doing in his spare time. Dustin, welcome aboard. Who is Dustin?
Thanks so much, Lee. Yeah, I really appreciate it. So Dustin is a decades-long enterprise SaaS seller. And so I am a bit of a SaaS sales nerd, if I'm being honest, and very much came up from the school of strategic enterprise sales. And so those are the things I'm passionate about. Now with the rise of AI, starting to get a lot more interested in the ways that sellers can use AI to be more effective and the smart ways to leverage it to be more strategic. And so those are a lot of the things I'm particularly interested in these days.
That's awesome. And Dustin, just as a teaser, I want to tell the listeners that you actually are building something that helps salespeople to be better prepared. But this isn't a commercial. This is a discussion about strategy and tactics. So we'll leave that as a teaser and may touch on it a little bit later. So Dustin, talk a little bit about your experience in sales. What did you sell? What kind of applications? What did you find that worked for you to be prepared to engage with prospects and customers?
Yeah, so I've been in SaaS sales my whole career from 2015 to now at every stage of the, call it 0 to 50 plus million ARR journey. And so predominantly I've been selling technical products to technical buyers, although I started my career actually selling at Yesware, one of the first sales engagement players. And so selling the sales leadership. And so the things I always found, regardless of whether I was selling to sales leadership, like I was then and like I am now, or whether I was selling more technical products, the things I always found working for me were a lot around what you said around deep preparation, in particular, deep preparation that came with an informed and well-researched point of view.
So Dustin, deep preparation means going into the technical documentation of your product and understanding all of the features and benefits?
Right. No. So deep preparation for me.
We're done.
Deep preparation for me always meant customer first, right? So what is going on at the customer account? What is going on with the customer specifically that you are speaking with?
And
the individual, exactly right. And one, can you help? Because you can't always help everybody in every situation. And it's important, I think, for sellers to recognize that. And two, if you can help, how can you help? And coming to conversations, coming to touch points with some point of view, understanding that, discovery is a process. We learn more things throughout, but having some point of view on what is going on in the world that impacts this potential individual and the company they're at. What are the things they have articulated that they are focused on? And can you help them? And if so, how? That is to me, table stakes. And that's always what I tried to focus on when I was coming to conversations.
So if that's table stakes, if understanding the challenges of the organization and understanding the challenges and goals and language of value of the individual, if all that's table stakes, there's two questions here. One, how do you make sure that you've got that? And then two, going past table stakes, because table stakes is just getting into the game, right? How did you ensure in the before era, Dustin?
Right.
In the before era, how did you make sure that you had those table stakes handled? Walk us through a morning in the life of Dustin preparing for a call with an enterprise account.
Yeah, whether I was doing it myself or coaching the reps I was managing, I think.
Right, because you weren't just a salesperson, you moved on to run sales in a couple of organizations.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. So, but again, in the before times, I think the process was unfortunately similar in that, first of all, you had to earmark time to actually spend on getting up to speed on what is going on at your account. If you take a typical enterprise account, there are things, even in the before times, you could find about what the executive team was saying, what folks were articulating about the strategic vision for the coming year, what were the top priorities. And so that's like the first place I would try to get a sense of, like, what does this company do? How do they make money? And what are the things they are articulating that are top of mind for them? And then going a level deeper than that, like, what are the trends happening in the industry that they're in that they are impacted by? And then does this person, this individual I'm about to meet with, have they articulated anything related to those trends as well? And then finally, after all of that and getting a good understanding there, starting to connect back to, okay, based on these things, can we actually help this customer, this company, and this individual? And if so, how? And those would be the things, those strategic priorities, those trends in the industry that I would be so curious when I'd be getting on a call to try to dig into deeper and understand how this individual thinks about it, how the organization thinks about it, and was my initial point of view and sense from what I could gather in that prep and research, was that accurate? And if, it's never 100% accurate.
Right.
What was accurate and where was I off? I was trying to have that be, 75, 80% of the conversation rather than a feature benefit discussion, because that's where, buyer trust was really started to be established. And where, as part of the discovery process, we could really flush out how and if we could help, all that momentum carrying us forward throughout subsequent conversations.
So you essentially were conducting the research so that you could align yourself and your organizational capabilities with the strategic goals and OKRs and individual goals of that customer you're talking to.
Right.
Here's a funny story. I was working with a rep at Google who was in Canada, and she was preparing to meet with an oil and gas company. She goes, "Hey, Lee, they talk about sustainability in each of their quarterly reports." And I go, "Virginie, what do they do?" She goes, "Well, they pull oil from the ground and refine it. Sustainability, huh? Do you think that's part of a key initiative of theirs, or do you think it's just marketing speak?" She goes, "Probably the latter." So sometimes there's, in your research, you find stuff that's actually, the technical term in sales enablement is bullshit. Right? It's just bullshit. And a sentient salesperson, a thinking person, has to look at that and go, that doesn't make sense. In the same way, if you look at earning calls, and for the past 4 earning calls, they go, we're going to be working on this in the future, right? If they say it 4 times, it means it's actually not a strategic objective. It's not an initiative. There's no money. There's no energy behind it. So that research is not simple research. You're not just gathering facts.
Right.
You're gathering lots and lots of statements, not just facts. And again, some of them is bullshit.
Right. And also, to your point, sussing out which of those things come with a sense of urgency, a sense of priority within the organization. And there could be several priorities that an organization has that the leadership team has articulated that the individual you're speaking to is actually disconnected from. And so which of the things have urgency, have been prioritized by the organization, i.e. have money allocated towards them, resourcing allocated towards them with a set, time frame associated with them. And then thirdly, but importantly, when you're talking to an individual, which of those things is this individual connected to and impacting and measured by? And so those are all the things you got to put together. And to your point, it's not as simple as just, hey, I got a collection of facts here in this, short little prep doc I put together based on some top quotes I found. I mean, that's better than nothing, but you got to go much deeper than that.
Right. And it doesn't make you conversant in it. You actually have to internalize it so you can have a wide-ranging conversation. The art of the pivot is something that's really important in sales. And I was running a power hour years ago, and one of the inside salespeople got someone on the phone and said, "I want to talk with you about that project that you're involved with." And the woman at the other end said, and that wasn't quite the phrasing, but that's essentially what it was. And the woman at the other end said, "Well, you must have seen that on my LinkedIn profile. I'm actually doing something different now." And every person in the room screamed, "What is that new project?" But the rep on the phone said, "Oh, okay, sorry, goodbye." Right? Because he had focused narrowly on like the 2 lines in the LinkedIn profile around current project, he wasn't prepared for the pivot.
Yep.
And so having a bigger picture perspective of what's going on in the organization. Oh, really? That's interesting. Tell me a little bit about the new project you're on. How did that align with the old project? Who's working on the old project? Was that completed? Is it still going on?
Right.
How important is the new project? Blah blah blah. Right. So you can play that out at some level. It's a whole new pain funnel you go down.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on two really important things there, Lee. It's one, a POV is just a hypothesis. You're not going
Exactly.
in there with the hard set of assumptions. This is just a hypothesis that you're then going in to a conversation to test.
Exactly.
And two, no sales rep, especially no enterprise sales rep, is going to be successful in general, but especially with discovery without intense levels of curiosity. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's a reason that, all of the most renowned enterprise sales leaders specifically call out curiosity as like the number one trait they look for in a sales rep. And so you just hit on why
Yeah.
curiosity is so important. You can't pivot without being truly authentically curious
Right.
about what you're encountering in that conversation.
Otherwise, it's just some version of whatever. Goodbye.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Dustin, people will say, and they're wrong. People will say that SDRs don't have the time to be prepared. What's your take? I've already given you mine. What's your
Yeah.
take?
Yeah. I mean, they're wrong, but for multiple reasons. And I think in different organizations, I think that statement is wrong for different reasons. One, if your SDRs aren't prepared, it's an indictment on the sales leadership.
Oh, I love that.
If the SDRs that my reps that I'm managing are working with are unprepared, I may not be the SDR manager, but if they're working with my reps, it's an indictment on me
Mm-hmm.
because I am clearly not preparing my reps adequately or coaching my reps adequately to be able to coach and partner with those SDRs, nor am I as a sales manager working properly with the SDR manager
Right.
to enable and train those SDRs. So that's like the first thing. The second thing is the approach that I believe in the most is strategic selling. And what that looks like is slowing down to speed up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Taking the time to understand the accounts that you're trying to break into and trying to engage and trying to win in order to win larger business from each account and grow those accounts over time. It's not a volume game necessarily. And so if you're an organization where the SDRs are measured solely by call activity metrics,
Yeah,
email
dials.
activity metrics, and everything just gets reduced to how many meetings did you book rather than that is important. Like SDRs do have to be booking meetings,
They have
but
to be good meetings.
they have to be good meetings and high quality. And so
Mm-hmm.
if the incentives for the SDRs, and this kind of comes back to the leadership, if the incentives for the SDRs are in place to focus on volume over, quality, speed over slowing down to speed up, then yeah, the SDR won't adequately prepare, but that's not their fault. And that's not because that's the better approach for enterprise selling. That's because of a lot of the incentives in place.
You said something before, you have to slow down to go fast. We say that in racing all the time. Car racing. The same is true in skiing, right? You apex a turn, man. If you're hurrying it, you're on your face. You look at people going down a hill in a giant slalom, and they might be doing 70, 80 miles an hour, but they are graceful. There is no fast movement there at all, unless, of course, they hit a pole. But I love what you said because it does vary. So if I'm a new enterprise rep calling on Thermo Fisher, I might spend a day researching that account before I pick up the phone.
Right.
If I'm an SDR calling on Thermo Fisher and they're one of 50 calls I have to make, can I spend that day? No. Can I spend 10 minutes? Absolutely. If I don't spend 10 minutes, I might as well just pick up the phone and hang it up.
Yep.
Because if I pick up the phone and call Thermo Fisher and say, hey, you need some of our stuff, right? We know how that's going to go.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely, from the perspective of the SDR, I always asked a lot of the SDRs that were working with my reps. And also when I was a rep that was working with an SDR, I always asked a lot of them. And so the bar that I was trying to set for someone who was, at most a year or two removed from college was pretty high. And the best, SDRs would sort of sink or swim in a way. But at the
Right.
same time, it's never all on them. Right.
Right.
And so that's where I come back to the coaching, the enablement. And what kind of message are you sending, not just to the SDRs, but to the entire sales organization about the proper way to engage your accounts? If you are a sales leader, if you are a manager, and what you're pushing is very transactional, very volume oriented, very activity oriented. Again, all in some cases metrics that are some piece of the puzzle. But if that's the message you're sending about how your sales organization is going to function, about how you're going to be measured, then behavior is going to follow from that. And so you have to strike this balance between, yes, quantity, because like we need opportunities, sellers need to be fed, SDRs need to be, measured, but also quality, both in terms of the types of meetings you're having and also the types of accounts you're going after. And those things, there's a balance you have to strike there. The best sales leaders do it, but it's easy to get distracted by, we just need more.
Yeah.
More is not always better in that case.
Right. When I was running enablement at Oracle and then at Google, I onboarded, I don't know, maybe 1,000 SDRs and BDCs over the years and enabled, not just onboarded, but enabled many hundreds. My first 2 conversations with them focused on, one, a professional is someone who works at their craft and they practice a lot before they step up to the plate. They practice a lot before they pick up a violin. They practice a lot before they go on stage. And professional means you get paid for it and you have to practice your craft,
right.
not just step up and swing a bat because you're going to miss. The second is, and I didn't ever hear this from anybody else, your call, your outreach might be the first touch that organization has ever experienced of the brand of your company. They might never heard of this company before. And with Oracle, it's possible. With Google, it's not likely. But
right.
I was prepping them for the future of, you have to be purposeful because you are setting that tone. If you're the first person to touch that company, and likely that person with regard to the company, if you're the first person touching that company, they're going to remember how that went. And you can either leave a good taste or a bad taste.
First impressions are everything.
First impressions are everything. First impressions last. Yeah. So let's make it a good one. And again, back to my prior statement, you have the time to spend 5 or 10 minutes looking up the person on LinkedIn and making the dial. God forbid that person went to the same school you did. God forbid that person is a scuba diver and you are too. God forbid there's a touch point that you're not going to use as your first touch point, but it better come up in conversation fairly quickly.
Right.
Because that's just another connection point. Yeah, by the way, I saw that you and I both did blah, blah, blah. So talk to me about your experiences in managing a sales organization and seeing different salespeople prepare differently and what the relative outcomes were.
Right. I think kind of picks up off something you just mentioned. I've been lucky, although it didn't always feel that way at the time, to only have worked at challenger brand startups. Like I've never worked at a startup that was the number one player in a space, regardless of how large or small that space was.
Right.
And so everything you just mentioned about the first touch point being an extension of the brand, being the first time they might have engaged with your brand was absolutely true everywhere I've worked. And so because of that, what I saw was the reps that were being most thoughtful, most creative, most deliberate about their prep, both in terms of understanding the person they were reaching out to, but like I mentioned before, the context within that individual is working, both within the company they're at and the industry they're in. Those were what the best sellers were doing and what their prep process looked like. And so you mentioned like you better be able to take 5 or 10 minutes. Honestly, the best enterprise sellers I was managing or working alongside of and tried to emulate were taking sometimes, to your point, 30 minutes, digging through, literally reading all of the like industry reports,
right?
Really understanding what the executive leadership said on their most recent earnings call or most recent TV hit, or what are the themes that are being reiterated on the most. And, prior to AI, doing this themselves, doing this super manually and taking pride in doing that. You can judge an enterprise seller, especially by what their account plan doc looks like. And like a corollary to that is like, do they even have one? And so,
yeah, there's that.
And so like, how in depth are they? And again, it's not creating an encyclopedia for the sake of creating an encyclopedia. It's searching and being laser focused on what I call relevancy,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like those initiatives, those priorities, those industry trends that are most important and top of mind,
Mm-hmm.
and that you connect back to. And so the reps that were doing that, the quality of their conversations was just numerically different that you
Right.
could measure through, Gong or any other call
Right.
recording provider. They were talking much less,
Mm-hmm.
listening more. They were having much higher discovery call to demo conversion. They
Mm-hmm.
were also the ones for whom you could tell were planting the seeds of building a either coach or champion within the person they were speaking to. And the reps that were not doing that intense prep, they were the ones, approaching these calls in a more cookie cutter fashion. They were
Mm-hmm.
talking more frequently, listening less. They were much more rigid in their conversation too, much less free flowing, much less, willing to adapt and pivot when something interesting came up. Like they had a script they were following.
Right.
And
And the darn customer never follows that script.
and they don't follow the script. And so when the seller sticks to script, when the buyer's not or the customer's trying to have a conversation, the tension that creates in these calls is palpable, and something I noticed after listening, thousands of calls that
Right.
my reps or my colleagues were doing. And so those were some of the things I noticed. And it's very palpable once you've seen it, over and over too.
Right. You'd get reviews of sales teams and how they did from the customer. And the feedback is they didn't listen to us.
Right.
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 Why didn't they listen to us? Because they weren't prepared to listen. They were
Yep.
prepared to talk.
Yeah, I just
Right.
wrote actually recently on LinkedIn about that idea that a customer can tell, especially an experienced buyer, when you're listening to respond versus when you're listening to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And what you just said is that idea of like we all suffer as sellers from the perception of seller deficit disorder, that
Mm-hmm.
we don't care about what the buyer has to say, we don't listen, and we have an underlying motive of just sell, sell, sell.
Yeah.
And in this world where buyers are getting inundated more than ever with outbound and with generic outreach,
Mm-hmm.
and where sales teams are less efficient than they were in previous eras of sales.
Efficient or effective?
But I'd say both, and
Okay.
they're related. But in a world where both of those things are true, we're seeing buyer trust, hit all-time lows. And we're
Right.
seeing buyers just, chalk up every salesperson being more and more similar, right? Like that is the battle we face as sellers. And so if we're not approaching these calls differently, more strategically, then we're just going to be placed into that bucket and suffer for it.
Yeah. I just got involved in a LinkedIn conversation. Someone posted a message saying, SDR said, don't hate me because I'm a salesperson. Do you have a minute? And the person said, I'm going to hang up. And so the question the person posed was, what's the next statement? Well, the next statement is your SDR should be prepared rather than that throwaway, like, don't hate me. Are you really? Are you serious?
Right.
When I receive a cold call, if that person has done some due diligence, I'll give them a minute.
Yeah.
I'll say, you put the work in. Let's see where this goes. If they call me up and they don't know who I am or my company does, forget about it.
Yep.
As they say in your city, forget about it.
Yep. I mean, don't get me wrong. I am all about a transparent approach.
Yeah.
Especially with cold calls where no one likes to receive a cold call like to their mobile device, like their cell phone. Like no one likes that. So I'm all for like an opener to a cold call that is something along the lines of like, hey Lee, like this is Dustin, cold calling you from XYZ. Hey, do you have a minute? I'd love to chat about XYZ, thing that I've discovered about your company or organization, like something that proves you've done the research combined with that transparency. Like that's gold if you can do that.
I have a perspective on how you can improve your results on this initiative.
Yep.
Wait, what?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. They say that you call mid-level management and they're prepared to say no, right? All they can do is say no. You call senior management, and not every salesperson knows this. Senior management is always looking to improve their view of the world, right? They own the problem. They want to understand different ways of looking at their world.
Right.
And if you show up with, here's a thing, do you want it? The answer is no. Here's a perspective I have on how you might be able to improve your results. Really? Tell me about your assumptions. Well, some of those assumptions are wrong. And let me tell you why. Great. Now you're in discovery.
Yes. And to my point earlier, like in a world where buyer trust is low,
Mm-hmm.
and the perceptions of salespeople is low. That is how you start to plant the seeds to earn that, vaunted truster advisor status that we're all looking for in order
Right.
to build champions, in order to, win business at the largest accounts, the largest deals, right? Like that's the foundation for doing that. And also the exciting thing for sellers is like the executive leader that you mentioned, the senior manager persona that is looking for any edge they can get and any way to improve their knowledge of the world. Those make, if you can really truly provide them value and provide them with a new perspective, those make for the best champions too.
Yeah.
They're the hardest to get to in many ways because their bar is high.
Mm-hmm.
But in turn, those are the ones that you will see you win the largest deals from, you grow accounts the largest with. And those will be the champions that you look back on your run in a company or your run in your sales career and say, yeah, like that's how I was able to close my biggest deal ever, is because of this person, this champion I was able to foster.
It requires thinking outside of the box. I was part of the key account team on Xerox years ago, and Xerox hadn't yet split its business process outsourcing organization apart from its product organization. It had bought it years ago, and it already announced it was going to split it again. So I had the opportunity to ask the CIO a simple question. Hey, Charlie, have you thought about how you're going to divvy up your IT assets? It was still like a year off. He goes, no. Shit. We better get working on that. Right. A simple question. And I was looking out for his interests.
Right.
There was zero specific opportunity for Oracle in that question, except we were taking care of, one of our primary contacts. He needed to get to work on it, and we needed to help him with it.
Right.
And it was one of those important, not yet urgent things, right? At some point in the next few months, his CFO was going to call him and say, hey, Charlie, and Charlie wasn't his name, but hey, Charlie, how are we doing on divvying up the assets? What do the relative costs look like?
Right.
And if his response had been, gee, I don't know, I'm going to take a look at that, that would have been a career limiting move.
Right.
Instead, he was in a position to say, here's what it's looking like so far. I'm happy to work through it with you at your convenience.
Right. And again, because when you have an approach of trying to add value and taking a strategic approach rather than a more transactional approach to sales, you can place those kind of questions within your accounts in a way that may not provide an immediate dividend for you and may not be an immediate opportunity for you, but have planted the seed where you, in, a few months' time, when Charlie is knee deep, eyeball deep in thinking about how they're going to divvy up the IT assets, like you're going to be able to work with them on that or an associated relevant project when the time comes. But if you're just looking at your accounts as like transactional opportunities, like how can
bags of groceries
fastest, you're not going to be able to tee up questions like that because you're going to be looking for the quickest path in, the quickest way to know, quickest way to, rule in or rule out if there's an immediate opportunity.
The best salespeople create lifetime followers.
Yep.
Right? Their customers say, and I've heard them say this, when Dustin moves to his next company, I don't care what he's selling. I want to hear about it.
Yep.
They trust you implicitly. You've taken good care of them before. You've had their best interests at heart. They assume you've made a good move to wherever it is. They want to talk to you again. And usually that comes from a salesperson saying, listen, this initiative that you're on, that we've been talking about, it's probably not a best fit for us. I have a partner that can handle that, or there's an adjacent vendor I'd suggest that you talk to. I mean, they're competitors, but really they're a better fit for you. And boom, now you have a customer for a lifetime.
Yep.
People who get in this business who want to be sales professionals create annuities that way, right? They create those customers for life. And most people never get that kind of coaching. Most people don't get the coaching around every interaction you have with a prospect or a customer. Think about their relationship bank account. Yep. Are you making a deposit or a withdrawal? You have to make a lot of deposits before you get to make a withdrawal, and be intentional about both.
Yep. I'm not the person who has been a 20-year sales manager or sales leader, but I put a lot of emphasis on the importance of sales leadership and driving that type of behavior
Mm-hmm.
because I've been lucky to benefit from some of the best sales leaders from like the PTC, BMC tree, the John McMahons, the Scott Davises of the world that were teaching like the command of message approach and how
Mm-hmm.
to truly be a partner for your customers, how to truly approach these things strategically. And so because of that, and because of my experience with that and seeing firsthand what that did for me and what
Mm-hmm.
that did for, my colleagues, I put a lot of weight on sales leaders to be pushing that message throughout their organization, because it all comes back to like what type of tone are we setting within the organization for how we view interactions with our customers and what we're trying to drive every day.
Right. So, Dustin, let me give you a hypothetical. I just freed up some time in your calendar. You're a pretty smart guy. You know what salespeople need. You kind of know your way around this AI thing. What would you build? What would be the features and functionality of a platform that might help AEs be better prepared for sales conversations?
Well, as you can see, I'm pretty passionate about the idea that like these sales conversations you're having and the touch points you're having in order to break in and engage accounts needs to be well researched, thoughtful, informed, and not a sort of spray and pray automated approach.
Mm-hmm.
And so the things that I'm most interested in are using current and new and coming technologies like AI and advancements in AI to do those things better, to
Mm-hmm.
be more informed, be more strategic, and engage accounts in a more thoughtful way. And so to me, it comes back to this idea of like prep and research. And again, the combination of what I call relevancy
Mm-hmm.
with timeliness, right? So when an account or an executive in account mentions that they are allocating, X dollars to, their cloud migration initiative this year, can you pick that up in a timely fashion
Mm-hmm.
and then form a hypothesis and POV around that you then use to engage that
Mm-hmm.
account with either an initial touch point or, as part of your prep process.
Mm-hmm.
That combination of relevancy and timeless and using AI and other technologies to get at that information inside of the accounts that you're trying to strategically go after. Like that's the stuff that's most interesting to me, and the
Mm-hmm.
stuff that AI and the development of it unlocks in a way that you can truly do that more efficiently, but
Mm-hmm.
also for the reps that were doing that, 10 years ago very manually, they're also going to be even more effective now because they were already doing this 10 years ago,
Right. As you were.
manually. Yeah. And now that can be done quicker and
Mm-hmm.
deeper and
Mm-hmm.
therefore more effective. Like that's the stuff that's most interesting to me in terms of like the next evolution of sales tools that I want to see built.
Nice. Well, sorry. Not that you want to see build, you're actually doing.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah. So, congratulations on that. I get proposals every day from people that want to be on this podcast. Why? I don't know. Most of them get shot down because they're pushing technology over people and process.
Mm,
And your approach was the opposite, right? You started with the people, you have the experience, you are taking a thoughtful approach to helping salespeople be more productive, more effective, more relevant to their customers. So that's something that I want to acknowledge and reward, right? So here
thank
we
you.
are talking about this. It's a topic that's near and dear to my heart because for 7 years at Oracle, I was the one doing much of that work for my individual salespeople and showing them how to do it and then helping them again to do it.
Yeah.
And even today in my coaching practice, I will sit looking at a customer's or prospect's website and talk through. So, what do you think about what's up for them? What do you think the strategic initiatives are? So, I'm back into it.
Yeah.
And the ability to outsource, particularly the notifications or the time relevancy, is really interesting. And to have some of the source information available at fingertips as opposed to hunting around for it, I think is great. I do have a bias. I think that, and we talked about curiosity, providing a rep with a script, as we talked about, wouldn't be my goal state. And it doesn't sound like it's yours either, because
Right.
then the rep isn't conversant in the actual problem. They can just read off the script. And by the way, if they're reading off the script, we can use an AI that can do that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Right. Right.
I'll have my AI call your AI, right? A rep who is just parroting words is more expensive and takes up a lot more space than a bot.
Right. Yep. Yeah. And I think like another point I often make, especially when it comes to AI and sales, is like, in my view, I have strong opinions on what are the right applications of AI that a sales leader should be trying to push across their sales team, that a sales rep should be thinking about incorporating, versus what are the wrong use cases for AI. And to me, it often comes back to this idea of like strategic versus transactional selling.
Mm-hmm.
And also, what are the things that make an enterprise seller uniquely valuable, right? What you just said, if it's just reading off of a script, like I can have an AI bot do that. They're not going to be effective, the AI bot, but at least they'll cost a lot less than the
Right.
human reading off a script who also won't be effective. And so
Right.
to me, there's this like spectrum that overlaps well with
Mm-hmm.
this concept of strategic versus transactional approach to sales. That overlaps really nicely to me with my view of like the right uses for AI versus the wrong uses of AI, and the things that help a seller be more strategic, cut down on, certain repeatable administrative tasks in
Mm-hmm.
order for them to spend more time being more effective on underlying research and prep and POV building, versus just simply like automation for the sake of automation.
Right.
That's just not something that I'm going to be a big believer in for how AI can help. And unfortunately, like a lot of the tooling out there so far, AI tools for sales, fall into this automation, try to replace the BDR,
Right.
try to automate outbound bucket, and less on the, how do you accentuate and make more effective the enterprise seller who is doing well-crafted point of view building, research, etc.
Everybody wants a shortcut.
Yes.
I'm going to run the Boston Marathon this year, but I'm not going to qualify and I'm not going to train. And I'm just going to jump on the course in Hopkinton
Yeah.
and I'm going to try to run 26.2 miles and I'm going to die at mile 5.
Yep.
And they're going to cart me off and ban me from ever being on the course again.
Right. Right.
How well did that work out?
Right. Exactly. And again, like it's unfortunate, but I think the tide is slowly changing. I'm seeing more and more interest in like the applications of AI towards the things that we've just talked about being like the smart uses and the things that accentuate what enterprise sellers are uniquely good at and
Mm-hmm.
uniquely valuable at. I think the first wave of AI in sales was a lot of these like automation tools that a lot of people tested out because it had high levels of promise. And then people saw that they weren't super effective and that using AI to just do more of the spray and pray outbound tactics is not like an improvement from where we were before AI. So I think we are seeing the pendulum shift a little, or swing back a little more.
Good.
Which makes me excited, based on what we're building and what I'm passionate about. But to me, that's like the main thing.
Here's the good news, Dustin. You don't have to convert all of them.
Yeah, that's true too.
You have the opportunity to convert a small percentage of the true believers.
Right.
And that will keep you busy for the next 10 years.
Yeah. Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
That's it. I think we're actually at a good place to wrap now. So, a couple of key takeaways. One, to sell is human. No, that's Daniel Pink.
Daniel Pink, yeah.
To prepare for selling is important, right? Yeah, Lee Levitt said that, and Dustin Beaudoin said that. So we're in strong agreement, violent agreement on that one. Preparation's good, and depending on where you are in the organization and who you're calling on, you might prepare a little bit more, you might prepare a little bit less. You can't show up unprepared.
Yep.
You have to come with a point of view. If you're a BDR making your first call of the day, have a point of view. If you're a key account director calling on your favorite account, you still better have a point of view. Second takeaway, things are changing. There are a lot more tools available at our fingertips. And just because I'm holding a Sawzall in my hand doesn't mean I should use it. Right? Or actually, the power washer is the one that gets most people in trouble. I got a power washer in my hand. I'm going to power wash everything, the dog, the car, the deck, and none of that goes well. And then third, and I promised this wasn't going to be a commercial, but Dustin's working on something that you guys, that y'all should pay attention to because I think it's some pretty cool stuff.
Thank you, Lee. I violent agreement with a lot of those takeaways too. I think one thing I'll add is that the teams, the sellers that win in the next 5 to 10 years with the new paradigm that we're in are going to be those that smartly deploy AI to strategically engage customers with both relevancy and timeliness. And the ones that do not do that, that look for shortcuts, I'm not very bullish on those.
Yeah. So. Dustin, where can people find you?
So I'm on LinkedIn, pretty active on LinkedIn. You can find me, Dustin Beaudoin, posting often about a lot of these topics. Also, if anyone wants to reach out to me directly, they can always reach me via email at dustin@chatae.ai, AE like account executive. And they can reach out to me directly if they want to learn more about what we're doing or any of this conversation is interesting. So those I'd say are the two common channels.
Great. Well, Dustin, thank you. Another great conversation. Much appreciated.
Likewise.
And we'll talk again soon. Thanks.
Thanks a lot.